There are a number of reasons why you may want to divide your plants. First of all, the plant itself may need to be renewed. If you notice there's less flowering or the plant looks has reduced vigor, looks floppy or crowded, you may want to divide the plant. The other reason is you may be expanding your gardens and you may want to take pieces of it and move them elsewhere. The plant may be aggressive or growing into other plant clumps. Also, the plant may have some weeds that are infested and growing right into the clump itself, so you may need to actually pull the clump out, take it apart, remove the weeds. The best time in general to divide most plants is in the spring for a number of reasons. First of all, the conditions are better, it's cooler, the soil is more moist, you have an entire growing season for root development, and also if you look at this plant, what you're going to try and divide when the foliage is maybe 2 to 3 inches high. So when you cut it apart, there's going to be less floppiness and awkwardness when the plant is replanted, when the pieces are replanted. There are some exceptions to that. The rule in the past has been if a plant is spring flowering, it was said that you should divide it in the fall, and a fall plant in the spring, but generally most plants are better if they're divided in the spring. If you do want to let a plant flower before it's divided, you can divide it in the fall. That's the second best time, and the worst time is in the summer when it's hot and dry. There are some exceptions. German iris, for example, like to be divided when the flowering is finished, so in late summer, mid to late summer. There are also some plants that prefer fall division. Some of the fleshy rooted plants like peony, Siberian iris, oriental poppy. What you should do when you go to divide a plant is try and pull out the entire clump like this. Try to avoid breaking or cutting as many of the roots as possible. And then you would decide how many pieces you want the plant divided into. So if I wanted this divided into 3 pieces, what I might do is cut through here. Generally, you can cut through the crown if it's got a tough crown. And then if you can pull the plant apart from then, there is less cutting of the roots, but you may actually have to cut right down through the entire root clump if you can't pull it apart. So, for example, we now have 3 pieces of this hemerocallis, the daylily, that we can replant. When you're replanting, make sure that you plant the new pieces at the same depth and growing angle as the original. And that applies, if you look at any plant, for example, the iris, not all plants have the roots underground. Iris has part of the rhizome above the ground, so you want to make sure that you plant that at the same level. Peony has a portion of the bud above the ground, so again, plant it at the same level or you may lose the flowering on the plant. There are also some creeping plants, some of the ground covers and the creeping sedums that have stems that sit on the ground and are very shallow rooted. Again, there's a temptation that people want to bury all the roots, but if the roots are at the surface, make sure that they're left at that level. When you replant, make sure that you prepare the soil properly. It's a good time to amend the soil with a triple mix. Make sure that the soil is moist, is kept well watered for probably the first year. If it's a dry summer, you may need to water once or twice a week, or maybe even more. If you're actually dividing in summer when it's hot and dry, it's a good idea to cut the foliage back to about a half or maybe even 2/3. When you're dividing at this stage, there's no need to do that. For example, this is a good stage to divide a hosta when the eyes are just developing. At this point, you can see where the eyes are appearing. So, for example, if I was going to cut this in half, I might cut it right down there to avoid damaging as few eyes as possible. There are some plants that dislike dividing. Some of the plants with long, fleshy tap roots dislike being divided because they don't like the roots disturbed. If you do need to divide those kind of plants, try and keep as much of the root ball intact as possible. And just make sure that you look after the plant for the first year until it gets established.